How about the Grizz? I listened on the radio. I watched the game back, but I was in transit with both games kicking at the same time on my way to Bozeman. What did you think of just Montana's season debut against Central Washington?
Um, so I want to ask you this question
Okay.
because I'm having a hard time with you and I have both been, obviously covering the team for a long time. We've been watching this level of football for a long time.
Yeah.
I've been having like a weird feeling of like how we view things as far as how we, you know, judge and try and grade the team and try and view the team as a whole when it comes to the landscape of the rest of the FCS and
Sure.
like and judging it based on like big picture versus like small picture. Now, like what do I mean by that? I mean like sometimes I feel like it's hard. And I don't know how you feel about this. But I feel like with today's landscape of the FCS, right? Like Montana should be top 5 all the time, right? And that like that
Yeah.
should be the expectation and the desire all the time, right? So you then like when you're watching a game and you're like, oh well, I don't think that this position group is a top 5 unit in the country, and you want to make these like kind of like sweeping things or judgments and assessments are like, yeah, seems like another year where they're just not on that level of being good enough in the trenches, and you just want to like say something like that after like the first 30 minutes of a game or whatever, and then but then you're like gonna step away and judge it from just the game itself on more of the more micro level. And I've just been like kind of going back and forth with doing that. I'm kind of rambling and not really making any sense, but it's kind of hard. It's been hard for me to like know how to view it, if that makes sense to you, or like,
Totally.
you know what I mean? Like everyone's talking about, how was Ayat's performance and things like that. And it's like, do we want to view it as in like, is he good enough where they're going to compete and win a national championship? Or are we talking like, are they like, how good does he have to be for them to be in the top 10 and just be feisty? You know what I mean? And I think they're two different conversations. So like, do we want to have the macro conversation, or do you want to break it down to the micro conversation? And I feel like that's just, and because the FCS is so watered down, I guess is where I'm trying to get at, where there used to be a lot more teams and it like meant more to be in the top 5. It was easier to have those kind of micro conversations, right? Where you're kind of really going through like the O line and this and that or whatever. But now that the FCS is what the FCS is, and your expectation is like you have to be a top 5 team, I guess it's kind of harder to look at it a certain way, if that makes sense.
It absolutely makes sense, man. I mean,
Yeah.
since 2019, the final four of the FCS playoffs has been made up of the same three schools and then a rotation of a fourth school. But I mean, Montana State has been in the final four every year except for 2023 when they lost to North Dakota State. Montana replaced Montana State in the final four that year when they played North Dakota State and then beat North Dakota State. And then North Dakota State, South Dakota State have been there as well. So it's been every single year you've had North Dakota State, South Dakota State, and then the only year it wasn't Montana State, Montana replaced them. So, like, to me, the storyline of the FCS in the post-pandemic era is twofold. One, the powers that be, the Dakota States and Montana State, and two, why the Grizz aren't there. Like, why the Grizz have not been there. But then they have been there the one year, right? So to me, that's like the narrative coming into this year is 2023 an anomaly that's bookended by two pretty mediocre seasons and the Grizz are still sort of stuck in the mud, or is 2024 the anomaly and actually what we saw in 23 is where the program's at and they're going to get back there this year. That's why I find this year's Grizz season so captivating, because I think that they went all in to prove that the latter, right? That 2023 is the norm, not the anomaly, and we'll see when it comes down to all that. The other thing though too is because of like the Dakota States and Montana State have had all sorts of varying transitions in terms of personnel. Who's your running back? Who's your receivers? Who's your tight ends? Whatever. But the two things that they've had so steadily, especially the Dakota States, is top three offensive lines, top three defensive lines, and top three quarterbacks.
Exactly. And that's what I always go back to, and where it's kind of hard to when you look at it from that lens, right? Of they need to be top 4, and we're comparing them to the Dakotas, like, because that's just what the standard has been,
Absolutely.
and you watch the first 60 minutes or whatever and you're like, I don't think in the trenches that they're there, and I don't think they're there at quarterback. but then it sounds like you're viewing it more from a pessimistic viewpoint and being a little bit more dismissive, and it's not as enjoyable to like cover a season that way or like watch a season that way. But if you are talking about it at the macro level like that, like that's kind of what it boils down to. You know what I mean?
It is, no doubt. And I think the most frustrating part for guys in our seats is that you look at the talent at the not those spots, not the defensive and offensive line, and not quarterback. And
Great.
absolutely, the Grizz have guys that. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, everybody from Justin Ford to Braxton Hill and Dante Olson and Alex Gubb. I mean, all these guys could play any of these schools we're talking about. On offense, Eli Gilman, Keelan White, Nick Ostmo,
Hooray. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Samari Torre, Sammy
Yeah.
Kim. Most of the tight ends would at least be in the mix.
Yeah.
So the Grizz are absolutely right there. I think that's what's really so hard for the fan base to comprehend too, because what's the easiest positions to watch? Well, the guys that got the ball. So you're sitting there thinking, well, we got the best running back in the country, Eli Gilman. Like, why aren't we as good at running the ball as North Dakota State? Like, Gilman's better than the guys they have, but it's because it's the guys up front. I think the Grizz are a little better on the offensive line this year. I'm still
No,
team
I agree. Yeah.
defensive line, but I think they're better on the offensive line. Also, I saw South Dakota State, Montana State live and in person on Saturday. Both teams as advertised on the defensive front, no question about it. I thought both teams have significantly regressed on the offensive line. Like watching the Grizz replay and then those two teams' offensive lines, there's not that much difference to me. I think all three of them are pretty good. I don't think any of them are as good as the Cats were last year. Certainly not as good as North Dakota State has been over the years. Not as good as South Dakota State was a couple years ago when they beat the Grizz. I mean, that offensive line was lights out. I mean, they had three NFL guys on it. So um, maybe the Grizz are closing the gap there. I think that, but don't you think though that's what makes this Grizz season so fascinating is just that they did go all in on this completely opposite method of what those other three have used to build their team, and they're just saying, hey, let's roll the dice. Let's bring in all these dudes from the FBS and let's just see if we can make it work. I don't know if it's going to work yet, but I thought they showed at least good signs on Saturday.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's two ways to look at it, right? Like you can watch the first half and be pretty critical of the defense giving up 7 yards per carry and not getting guys to the ground as you would think against a program like that. But then you could be like, oh, well, that was the first 30 minutes of the season. They've been sitting out a long time. That other team had already played a warm up game. And then if you look at the second half, like they didn't allow a single thing and, they look pretty good. So I gave them. We started a new segment on our show, the SWX reporters card, where we give them like a letter grade every week, and I
Nice.
gave them a C. I gave them a C plus. I thought I gave them a C plus just because of the first half. I thought they were like an A minus in the second half. If they come out against North Dakota and play like they did in the second half, then I think we're going to learn a lot more about the Grizz after this Saturday. Is basically what we're getting at, right? Like I think
Yeah.
North Dakota will challenge them and we'll get a better assessment of the trenches. And I think we'll also get a better assessment of Ayat after Saturday. And I don't want to, with him, it's very interesting because I think people want to make sweeping judgments, but you have to remember like he hasn't started many games and he hasn't played many games where he knows he's not getting yanked right away. Um,
That
and
was my
you,
number one takeaway. He threw a bad pick and then they didn't pull him.
yeah,
I,
and
I mean, that in itself has to make so many people at that stadium so happy to
yeah,
not doing the quarterback carousel thing again.
yeah, and quarterback, growth and development is not an exact science. It's not linear. It's not, like sometimes it just the light bulb clicks. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. Like you have to sometimes be patient with it. So I'm excited to see him because I don't. The stat line looked okay, but a lot of the big throws and a lot of the yards were, yards after the catch or guys that were pretty wide open. There wasn't a ton of like tight window throws down the field. So I will be curious to see him against a little bit better defense, and I just want to see him because I think he's, and I don't mean this in a bad way because he is young still. I think he's very average at like every tool of being a quarterback. Like, and I don't think he's bad at necessarily really any of like kind of the tools when we're talking like
Mm.
arm strength, athleticism, accuracy, moxie. kind of all the things, right? He's not like, I wouldn't say that he's below average in any of them, but he hasn't shown that he's necessarily elite or above average in one particular category. So I want to see him, and I don't even care what the category is, whether it's, moxie or accuracy in reading a defense or a little more explosive with his runs or whatever. I want to see him get above average in one or two of those categories, because I think as a quarterback, you have to have an elite trait in one or two things. And so I want to see, like, what will those be from him, and we'll see how he grows and develops, and if he can do that, because I feel like they're not going to be national title contenders unless they get an elite trait out of the quarterback position in one of those things.
The one thing I do think he comes really naturally to him, and I think this is a strength and a weakness. I think his maneuvering in the pocket.
Yeah.
I think he bails too fast sometimes.
Hmm.
I think that that's a bad habit that he developed in high school, because if you look at his high school stats and his high school tape, like, they were getting beat up on a lot. I mean, he went something like 4-12 as a starter in high school. But I mean, we got a buddy who's a contributor here at Nuanez now, who works in Hawaii part time, and he says that that league that he played in is, filled with just D1 guys and, future Power Five type of guys. So high level of competition. But I do think he can get out of the pocket and make some stuff happen. I also think he does it too much. And Coach Marty's the one that pointed this out. He does the where he'll be sort of drifting to the left, and then he does the full spin around and run it back around to the right. When
Yep.
you can outrun people, that's a great trait. When you can't, you get caught from behind. You just turned a 3 yard loss into a 15-yard loss, and now all of a sudden, Coach Alk's pissed at you. And so that's the one thing I do. It's strength and a weakness at the
Yeah.
same time. But I agree with you. I think he's okay at so many things. But you're right. He needs
Yeah.
to, like,
Yeah.
become great at one or two things if he really wants to be a great quarterback.
And if we do see some of that maneuvering in the pocket, like on the touchdown to Drew Deck. I mean, he was dead to rights on a sack and was able to get out of it and then find Drew wide open. So if he can be able to, like, maneuver a little bit while keeping his eyes downfield and then be able to distribute the ball after he kind of gets out of trouble, that'll be something to watch. But yeah, I just want to see just one thing that, like, because, like, right now there's just not like a signature, like, all right, this is 100% like what we know, like what we're gonna get from him. Like, he's gonna be really good in this area, and we'll work on this. Right now, it's just kind of just like across the board.
Yeah.
Like, he's solid across the board, but, like, you also don't know what you're gonna get, like, ceiling across the board either. So I think just kind of getting a little bit of an identity as a quarterback and within the offense is something I just want to see.
Yeah, I mean, last thing on this, and I'll let you go. Reading between the lines, um, I think he's going to take big jumps the next month, because I think that they are committed to him as their guy. Like, Bobby Houck brought him to the press conference, and Bobby Houck said nice things while he was sitting there. And Ayat did well at the press conference, I thought. And he wasn't like, sometimes when it's the young guys, they're like, and they're sitting next to Coach Houck, they're like stumbling over their words, and they don't want to mess up. And I thought Ayat was good, and he said nice things about Gilman. He said nice things about his offensive line. I think he admitted when he read the coverage wrong on the pick. I thought all that was good, and then the fact that Coach Houck talked nicely about him in front of him again on Monday. He's been talking to his quarterback club about him and saying nice things too. So I think they're finally all in on this guy, and I think that's going to help him grow in his confidence, don't you?
uh, yes. Let's just say that, like, as a young kid, and when you're getting kind of in and out and pulled around, it would be hard. And when I talk about that quarterback development not being linear, and it can come and go, and the light bulb can click on at any point, a lot of that is not physical, it's mental, and it would not be the easiest thing to be a quarterback in this coaching staff, in this regime. Like, Coach Hauk
Yeah.
does
Yes.
it the way he does. Coach Pease is the way that he is, and for good and bad. Like, that's just how it is. I'm not, like, criticizing or
Absolutely. Yep.
acknowledge. Like, it's just like it would be hard mentally to get used to that, style. And once
Especially
he's
when
kind
you're
of,
like him, right?
yeah, and
When you're
he's
like how Kaylee Ayat is. Like, Dalton Sneed responded well to it, because Dalton Sneed's kind of like you yell at him, he yells back at you, and he's going to go back out there on the field. Ayat's not like he's just a totally different personality type.
yeah, McDowell, I feel like it just kind of went one ear out the other, and he just kind
Yeah.
of did his thing, like, yeah, he's, I don't know like that well. I mean, I've talked to him a bunch of times, but he's kind of he's a little bit quieter, a little bit more reserved. At least like when you're around him, he doesn't have like that like everyone rally around me type of rah rah, yet. But I think that once he's kind of given the keys and he knows it's his and he can like be himself and play free, and when he does make a mistake, he knows he's going back in there and can respond, which is what he did on Saturday. Like like let's just see it. Let's see him. Hey, it's yours, dude. Like what do you got? And so it's gonna be interesting to see how he does over the next month, like you said.
We'll certainly check in with you sooner than later, but thanks for doing this with me today, man.
Yeah, of course.